Before next session, I need to reply to the first session, which was for Sorina as a moderator. I want to add something. I want to add about gender balance. Look at the colors. It's deliberately there. So we use pinky colors because of the gender balance, because we are aware of the problem. So we are using everything. You see your badges. We are using everything to be as much as we can gender balanced. Basically, the problem for the first session I was trying to solve, so we have Megan.
Just a comment. I think when they say gender balance, they mean 50-50, not 25%.
Yes, I know, but it was difficult to find 50-50 on this. Thank you, yes. Yes, but yeah, we will progress it till the end. So for now, let's go back to the topic of our second session. Our second session is about digital literacy. Can you please show on the survey, slide 9. Well, we did a survey, as Sorina mentioned. We did a survey, and you told us that one of the biggest problems in our region is digital literacy, which we will see. The digital divide, sorry. So, can we see that? So you can see on this slide, from time to time, that digital divide, 60% of you was pointing as a huge problem. So we can switch to slide 20, number 20. Do see countries share similar internet-related challenges and concern to some extent, significantly, to a limited extent, and next one. Okay, this is the right one. Digital divide in Southeastern Europe. So you were telling us that digital divide is the huge problem here. But I really don't understand what is digital divide. Anyone from the audience wants to try to define this digital divide thing? How do you see this problem? What is the digital divide for you? As I said, from time to time, you see. Žarko.
In my perspective, digital divide is a division made on digital parameter.
Okay. More thoughts? Opinions? Oksana here.
Thank you, Оксана Приходько, Европейская медиаплатформа Ukraine. Digital divide for me is to ask my husband-in-law to install apps which block my screen of iPad, and it took for me, for example, 1 hour to use to learn to use it, and for my 1 year grandson, it took only 5 minutes to unblock it.
Okay, next one there.
Thank you very much. I'll resume it in a sentence. Perhaps one of the biggest inequalities of the 21st century. We could perhaps add a question mark at the end. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Yes? There?
I think it's the gap between the opportunities of access and literacy and substructure between countries or regions. That's digital divide for me.
Superb. Okay. Anyone else? No? Another one? I will.
Igor Kožukaru, Republic of Moldova. We have a very good access to the internet, but we doesn't have enough national content because we doesn't have enough capacity to use this technology. This is a very huge gap. We have specialists only in the Chisinau, but we don't have specialists in the whole country. That is a very good divide. We have a very good capacity at the government level, but at the local level, we doesn't have enough capacities.
Next. There.
Thank you. For me, digital divide is that we are getting framed sometimes by some platforms like search engines, that we can't decide ourselves what information we're getting to see. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh.
We have one person from remote participation that is chiming in. Charles Navid from Yandex, he said, digital divide is not just the gap in knowledge, but anything that presents a barrier to people being able to get that knowledge and use it, economic, physical barriers, because people have disabilities, etc., which includes also lack of infrastructure, bandwidth, high hardware costs, etc.
Okay. Anyone else wants to define this? No. Okay. We will start with our key participants. So as I open this session pointing out that we have the woman in among key participants, so we will start with you, Megan. My question is how European Commission is seeing digital divide, what you are doing, so tell me what is the position, especially from European Commission.
Well, thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, of course. You're always a very dynamic and enthusiastic group, so it's really very nice to be here. I think the digital divide, as many of you have said, is not just between countries, it's also within countries. We have the urban-rural divide, we have the educated-uneducated divide, we have the rich-poor divides, which all help to exacerbate the digital divide. But one thing that we have seen, which I think is a point of hope and positive sign, is that amongst young people in Europe, and again, I'm speaking primarily for the European Union member states because that's where we have the best data. We see that amongst young people, let's say under 25, those differences between rich and poor, urban, rural, educated, less educated, are really not so much there. So there is a lot of hope for youth and development. That doesn't mean that everything is perfect or that there's nothing else that has to be done. There are many, many things that have to be done. And first, I think we have to look at the statistics and the data and the information. And there are two aspects there that I would point you to. One is something called the Digital Economy and Society Index, which is something that's published by the European Commission every year, and we do a whole series of assessments of internet connection, accessibility, etc. And I can discuss that in more detail. I don't want to take the time now. And we also have something called a Eurobarometer assessment, which looks in quite a bit of detail at issues relating to mobile telephony use, internet connections, broadband, etc. So first we have to look at the data. And you will have seen, all of you, that in gross assessments and overall and on average, the countries, and again I'm speaking primarily of the European Union now, in Eastern Europe don't do as well as the countries in Western Europe, let's say, with some exceptions. I mean, we see that there's faster growth in some countries like Romania. I think in Bulgaria also the growth has been, and improvements have been quite dramatic, but starting from a much lower level and of course not attaining the same overall status or situation as Denmark or Finland and some of the others. So first you have to look at the data and see how and where we can make changes. Then what are we doing about it in the European Commission and what are we proposing as changes? Well, first of all, one very important area which I think is very dear to my heart and of importance, is the initiatives on web accessibility. We have a whole series of initiatives on web accessibility which are going through the Council and Parliament now to try to improve and make sure that people with disabilities or other disadvantaged people have better access and can better use the internet. That's one thing. We have a whole series of initiatives under the Digital Single Market strategy, of which some of you may have seen already some of the digitizing the economy proposals that came out already this week, at the beginning of this week. Where are we? Friday. Yes, it was the beginning of this week. So there are a whole series of issues there. There are a number of aspects too relating to review of the telecommunications framework. We have a whole series of improvements on research and innovation in information technology and society. We have a series of other initiatives that are underway as well. So I don't want to go into all the details of those, but one that is of particular interest, and I think also for this area, is an initiative called the Grand Coalition on Digital Jobs. And this is something that was launched already in 2013 and will be reinvigorated in the next weeks. In the context of an improved and even better approach to improving digital literacy and skills in Europe. And we have seen in that area already an improvement in about 2 million people's skills, digital skills, in being improved over time. Because it's one thing to have broadband access, it's another thing to be able to use the access that's available. So we have to look at the interests both for citizens in terms of communication, access, exchange of information, and better use, but we also have to look at how small businesses, entrepreneurs, web entrepreneurs can have and need access to the internet to grow their companies and to take advantage of the innovative potential of the internet. And as we say in our digitization of economy and industry proposals, all industry is becoming digital. So this is something that's very important and one of the reasons why we have all these initiatives that are going on. So I don't want to speak too long, but that gives an overview, I think.
It's an overview. So I think in Southeastern Europe we have several countries which are part of Europe, several countries are not part of European Union, but the question is, you heard the overview. Do you want anything else from European for European Commission? So, do you want some shaping of their projects, of their whatever? Do you have anything to add? Anyone? Oh, okay.
Sorry,
Megan.
I realized in my little notes I had put one more thing that I forgot to add, and that relates to multilingualism and internationalized domain names, which is something that you had mentioned too as a factor. And the European Commission is what started the .eu domain name, and one thing that we've been trying very hard to do, and since there's some people from ICANN in the audience, I repeat it, we've been trying to finalize the .eu in Cyrillic for the Bulgarian users, which has been a long, hard struggle, and we're still trying to finalize the .eu in Greek, which is an even longer and more difficult struggle, believe it or not. But multilingualism is another aspect that we are working very hard on, and both in research and innovation. So just to add those to that.
I have connections in ICANN, so they will settle this. So basically, Oksana was saying.
Thank you. It was actually one of purpose of my research, which I presented during Speaker's Corner, and we would like just in Ukraine to understand, to see more active political role of European Union in some political issues regarding internet governance. First of all, VSIS +10 review process. It's extremely important for us to understand how we in Ukraine can live signed a new IT regulations in Dubai, because as a result, only 2 countries in this region signed this agreement, and all others did not sign new IT regulation. What does it mean for us? We need more explanations on political levels, because from our side, from civil society side, we initiated a lot of roundtables, a lot of discussions, a lot of events, but we need more political support. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. Anyone else? So you don't want anything from European Commission? Okay. Okay, so we heard a story about a lot of projects from European Commission, but we have in our region good and bad examples. As we saw from time to time, digital divide is a problem, and I want to switch to you and to Valentin. I want to ask you, how did Romania get into top 5 broadband, high speed, whatever in the world? It is often that we see Romania as high-speed country. How is that possible?
Okay, thank you for introducing, let's say, the high-speed broadband Romania, which is a fact. But it's a fact for, let's say, more than 60% of the country. The rest, which means rural areas, are not so much covered by high-speed broadband. The big cities are, let's say, in the big league worldwide, which is nice, good for business, good for education, good for entertainment, good for everybody, for Facebook. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I should make just a very short, let's say, parenthesis. Speaking of these e-skills for jobs, European awareness campaign, which we coordinate in Romania. And speaking of Facebook, Last year we got a call from someone from the Commission asking how does it happen that we are first on the Facebook in Europe in this campaign, let's say leading all the pack. Well, coming back to that, which is, let's say, the way or the path to give you an answer, there has been in Romania quite a tradition for soft developers, for hardware, let's say, producers in the last 30 years or so, at least. Well, computers, big ones, mainframes, go back to late 50s, actually, which is an even longer tradition. Then governments, ever since, let's say, the 90s, have addressed once in a while, if not, let's say, most of the times, this issue to provide, let's say, backbones, to provide, let's say, access to most businesses, to people of Romania to be part of the digital society, which is taking shape in the world. So on one side, governments approached and addressed this issue by building, or better to say, not exactly building, but facilitating foreign investment, not only investment in GSM, in broadband, in telecoms, in whatever. So the private sector was there to seize the opportunities. And they did that early 90, of course, ever since 2000 and on. So there have been quite a momentum for a long time to address this issue, to develop, let's say, access to Romanians for being part of the digital society. As I said, we are not so, let's say, happy to witness, however, that around 39% of Romanians are not on the internet. They are offline, mostly people living in rural areas. Of course, if we say that rural areas are not, or people living in rural areas are not really hooked on the internet, it could be a fake statement, because smartphones, for instance, are very popular in Romania. They represent something like 40% of users of let's say, phones, mobile phones. So if you, and the country is covered by the three major telecom players, deep down to the most remote places. But, however, fixed lines and fixed broadband is not so popular in rural areas. So you can have satellite if you are keen on that, even in a remote place. You can have, let's say, a smartphone and get hooked on the internet. So, but however, to give a chance to everybody, which would mean access to education, access to e-government, and paying taxes, why not, and whatever, could mean more than we can offer now. So there is, let's say, a challenge to address this issue by the present government, by the future governments, because politically speaking, you never stop. And this is the nice or the beauty thing for a country, each or every country, to continue in this perspective, not to stop and say, well, enough with that, because, well, we are ready to address some other issues. Sorry for that. I can give you some more stats or things, but probably, yes.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question
Yes.
as well? One thing that I know Romania has been very active in has been, and this is partly the job of your, or the initiative too, of your digital champion, has been to make sure that internet access in public libraries
Yes.
encourages and gives greater access to people.
Right.
Now, obviously, this is not for small companies, but even for young people or people
Yeah.
in rural areas, I think this has been an area that's been quite successful, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, this is a niche, after all, but it's an important niche. I mean, librarians, which can play a very important role in the local communities, have been trained, and all libraries, public libraries in Romania, have been equipped with computers and have access to broadband. So this is good. Actually, this is a program supplied by Melinda Gates Foundation to Romania. $4 million have been pouring for the last 3-4 years. And I'm actually in the know of this program because the Librarians Public Libraries Association is part of our campaign in Romania, a supporter of whatever we do. So this is a good, let's say, example, but then we want to go for more. That's the idea. I mean, if you stick together that and that and that, and of course, we try, and I would probably address already this issue, which could have been the last one. We started last year in Romania the so-called Coalition for Digital Jobs. It's called Skills for IT Romania. It's part of the Grand Coalition for Digital Jobs, which started back in March 2013. And this is good because more or less producers in our association and some other, let's say, brands asked for some cohesion, for some vision together to go to the next level. And what we do with this, let's say, apart from eSkills campaign, which is let's say, has been a yearly campaign, we do some other, let's say, kind of activities which include, let's say, IT training, IT competitions like coding days in schools, Hour of Code. We do webinars once in a while, let's say, with schools all across Romania. And we produce e-guides about cybersecurity or some other hot topics, which are, of course, on our sites and distributed online to whoever is interested. And of course, we also encourage participation of young people in IT summer camps, okay, which is also very good.
Okay.
I'll stop here.
Thank you, Valentin. I will start. You raised a lot of questions, at least to me, so I will ask the audience. Rural areas, in your countries, do you have those problems? Anyone? Connection in rural area, I don't want to repeat the whole story, so is this something that we can say it's a problem in our Southeastern Europe? Vale.
Okay, I would reformulate, because we did a few years ago with the other organizations, civil society in the region, research on how youth is using internet if the divide exists. And as had been said by Megan, the divide between rich, poor, less educated, more educated, it's really almost non-existent. But what is important when we look at a real meaningful access is how the people access. What is the device? If it's a laptop or it's a mobile smartphone, where then is mainly used for entertainment or for connection, so you don't pay, and then the telecom get angry because you use too much of Viber, WhatsApp, and these things. So I think that there is a layer that we are also experimenting. Of course, there is a last mile issue in certain rural area, but each Bosnia and Herzegovina is more 100% of mobile. And now that after the broadband, with companies starting giving a small grant for student or having easy, the point is how small the package is, how much traffic, meaningful traffic you can have. So one thing is to be hooked on the main wagon, and other things that you can choose the train and the station when you want to stop or to explore. I think that this is more present in our countries.
Okay, anyone else?
Hi. I just wanted to say about that digital gap, that nowadays when we have mobile coverage, it is not so much a problem, and I would agree what Vale told about that. We made a research in Armenia about internet penetration, and we found out that we do not have that digital gap just due to the mobile coverage within a country. So, in that perspective, we do not have that gap.
Okay.
And from the neighborhood, I will add Žorž's perspective that also the mobile connectivity changed a lot. And we are nowadays also doing a lot to cover all this last mile connectivity problems with the mountainous areas of our country. But the more important is when access is really at present literacy, and how all these people, both elder and younger generation, can get meaningful information from the ICT and internet. That's why government, through the partnership with NGO, is going village after village with local communities and explaining what e-services are available, what ICT training platforms are there, and working with teachers, local communities and NGO together to raise the really value of ICT coverage in the country.
Anna from Georgia as well. Actually, I would somehow repeat the previous comment from NATO and add that I read a lot of reports, not a lot, there are not many reports on the infrastructure and literacy, but one of them I happen to have. This is from ICANN, done with Boston Consulting Group on fraction. Basically it says how are the infrastructure, how are the literacy, and a couple of other layers. They researched a couple of other layers together. And this research says that Eastern Europe is doing pretty well with infrastructure, but not so good with the literacy. So we have, as a reality in Georgia, in neighboring countries, in Southeastern Europe, I saw that Romania has a wonderful infrastructure, or in other countries in Southeastern Europe. So there are cables in the ground. Internet is going well, and there are many projects bringing internet to rural areas, like in Georgia. But the thing is that the people in these countries, the local people, don't understand the importance of internet, and they ask, why should I use internet? What is it for? So it's two realities. So we have infrastructure, but we need to make to explain what usage we can make out of this infrastructure, what can it bring at the end to the end users, how can they benefit it. So it's a very nice research. Again, it's ICANN e-friction, and I encourage everyone to have a look at it. It's a statistics-based research. Thanks.
Yes.
Hello. So. Mostly from the point of view which two of my colleagues presented before about access by doing a polling about mobile networks using as infrastructure. So focusing on the technical part of accessing, it's not even half of the story, because if the infrastructure is not affordable from price point of view to the end customer, it's useless. Thanks.
Sorry, do I continue introduce yourself?
Okay, my name is Constantin Marian from Romania.
Next.
Yes, Patrick Pennings from the Council of Europe. I wanted to concentrate on one of the issues that has been brought to the attention recently when the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe adopted a new recommendation on the digital citizenship. And in there, one of the key elements that has been put forward is the multi-literacy, and where we find that developing the literacy and possibility of citizens, whether they be young, children or older, because we haven't been speaking about this yet, but also the older generation has many difficulties with regards to the internet. So the multi-literacy education, I think, is one of the key aspects in order to, for us, to look at the digital divide. Thank you.
Peter.
Peter Strle, Ministry of Education, Science and Sport for Slovenia. I would refer to the rural-urban division. In our view, the development of infrastructure in urban area is driven by commercial interest, and because of this infrastructure is much more expensive on a rural area, there is lack of commercial interest, so this area actually are lagging behind. In our opinion, that this division cannot be covered by mobile technologies. The mobile technologies alone, they do not allow all the services and competition deployed. And so the government initiative in some form is necessary, that this division, this gap between urban and rural is actually covered.
Anyone else? Remote participation, yes?
So, okay, so this question is coming from Ucha Saturi from Georgia. He says, one of the main problems of the Georgia rural-urban gap for wired networks and ISP operators is wholesale access regulation, especially given the gentleman from the Council of Europe. He asked, what is the Council of Europe's recommendations on closing the digital, on wholesale access regulation problems? And he's from the Small and Medium Telecom Operators Association of Georgia.
Well, one of the other recommendations of the Committee of Ministers, which I will be speaking about a bit later this afternoon, is concerning internet freedom. And internet freedom stipulates, and I will go into detail about that, stipulates namely the right to access to information, but also the right to exploitation of internet systems and the necessity of governments to refrain from putting up barriers in order to do so.
Thank you. I will, I have, sorry, yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, so I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but just to comment on a couple of things that were mentioned. One is relating to e-government. Someone said that people have to be educated about the advantages of internet, etc., and how they can use it. And an area where governments can contribute to this is to encourage and force, I suppose is not really the word, but encourage their citizens to use e-government even more. So filling out tax forms online, having access to postal and telecommunication services, etc. By doing those things through the internet. It saves time, it's more efficient, it saves everyone time and money, and it shows also the citizens the advantages. So if you have the access available by using those systems, they learn very quickly how to do it. Just on the regulatory aspect, it doesn't apply in Georgia specifically, of course, but as I mentioned, the telecom regulatory framework is being reviewed, and we have a whole series of issues being looked at in that context. Roaming, of course, is one that has been, in theory, solved now, but one thing, and this is also in the context of the WSIS Plus 10 review, it's clearly said, and over again, how important an adequate and positive and engaging regulatory framework is to make sure that rollout of infrastructure takes place and that these access issues are also resolved. So that's another important aspect, especially relating to wholesale access regulation.
Okay, I can say we are not sure whether mobile phones or something else can cover this rural or any access problem to the internet. So I'm not sure, and I will ask Jan, who is expert in infrastructure, what is the answer?
So, okay, this has been the problem all around the world. It shows in quite bigger extension, for example, in Africa, where there are big, huge spaces that you need to cover somehow. And people is trying to sort of like cover it with the mobile internet or satellite internet first, and then decide if they want to dig the trenches and put the fiber in, right? Of course, it's better if you have a fiber in the ground to all these rural areas and city areas and everywhere else, because it's much more stable. It's not a shared media like air is. And lots of people is trying to push the physical limits of the air towards the limits that are barely usable anymore, right? You can't connect more than a certain number of people over a mobile technology and cover big areas. It just doesn't work. So sooner or later you will have to start digging trenches and put the fiber in, right? So I see mobile type of access, providing access as a temporary solution to cover the homes. Okay, for these people that are roaming around and carrying the phones, it's fine. But covering homes, it's a temporary solution for the problem.
Okay, do we have any?
There is a protest.
Protest? Who is protesting? Okay.
No, actually, I'm not protesting, but I know what you're talking about. Sometimes it's very difficult to explain, since we are convergent regulatory authority. We know that sometimes it's very easily to cover 90% of the country, but then the 10% is much more expensive than those 90%. We want and we are obliged to make sure that we give the opportunity to everybody. But we should not forget that we are speaking about two things. It's coverage, but also diversity of the services, pluralism. That's something that we also don't need to forget in this context, because we need to provide access for everything, but we also need to give different services, including media, including other technological issues and services that could be available in rural area, same as it in the cities. That's one of the main challenges for regulators to do that. We of course need to force some telecom operators, but also we need to offer some other proposals and giving other options to do that. Thank you.
Vlada.
Thanks, Dušan. I wanted to firstly to agree with the colleague that local content and local language is absolutely important. But then also maybe one suggestion for Jan, a comment, and for everyone, that we might have as a region opportunity to look into new technologies like white spaces, which needs a little bit of awareness and cooperation between the technical community and the regulatory authorities to try to experiment. We don't need to let the UK or the others to lead in white spaces experiment, for instance, as one of the technologies which might be kind of solve the solutions of access in remote areas.
So, okay, if I may, if I may respond to that, there is lots of work going on in ITF regarding the white spaces, and there's been technology developed for this dynamic dealing with with the white space. But what I wanted to share with you on this regard, on the rural areas, is a story from Africa. It actually happened at one Afrinic, I think in Ivory Coast or somewhere, where we had a meeting and the guy comes on stage and starts explaining that he is selling a very good satellite technology that can connect people on 64K or something very, very small. For our European understanding, it's not much. But then it was all fine. And he said, you can cover rural areas with this, it's not very expensive. But then what he added at the end actually irritated me a lot. He said, you don't need to build the fiber because you can use our technology to cover rural areas with the broadband. And I would say, don't fall into this trap. Don't fall into this trap. Go for good internet. Go for broadband.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Megan?
Sorry to come back again, but and I appreciate what you say, and you're right up to a point. And that is, could we not improve also the mobile technology and mobile access with better use of spectrum? I mean, this is an area where we've been arguing for a very long time that we have to improve and better coordinate and better use spectrum reserves. Another area where we could make a lot of progress. I'm not suggesting that broadband through fiber is not something we should all be doing, but there are also other things that we could be doing.
Yes, but physics says that there are limits to the air. Air has limits. We can push to a certain extent, but then we will have to stop somewhere.
But those limits haven't been reached yet, and we can improve the limits still.
You are in Serbia, so backhand and forehand is popular here because of Novak Djokovic. So basically, do you have any question on this rural mobile technology? Do you have any opinion? No? Okay, then we will use what Vlada told us, and basically a lot of you. It's about content, about literacy. We need that. So I will ask Voja to explain to me maybe some example from Serbia or something like that about literacy, how we approach that, how we approach local content, what we offer.
Speaking of literacy, before I answer your question, I would like to remark our colleague Žarko Tiček, when he stood up and gave us his opinion, that reminded me of yet another digital divide, which is literacy related, but literacy in legal terms. There are those people who know what happens legally, what obligations they take when they say, yes, yes, next, 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 I accept. And there are those who don't understand that they have entered a legally obliging contract which might turn south someday in some way. Turn south meaning they might be liable for things that they are completely unaware of. If they were to go to a lawyer's office and sign a contract, they will read it very carefully, consult someone, etc. With their notebook or their phone in their hand, they just want the service. Yes, I accept it. And behind that I accept it is a 50-page contract, which they didn't read and couldn't understand.
So we need to sue Microsoft because he offered this next, 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 okay.
I carefully avoid mentioning any brand names. And I want to thank Megan for mentioning IDN. That's actually the topic I was about to talk, to give you a brief overview of Serbian IDN experience, or should I say experiences, because there's more than one. In 2008, we got our .rs domain. Actually, we started using it. We were delighted. There were new rules, liberalization. Everyone could register as many domains. And nobody was picky and choosy asking, I cannot my domain name is Rodić or rodic.rs. Why cannot I use, actually it's Rodić, there is the critical mark over the C. After several years, there is a parallel process in a lot of European countries, introducing INDN to the second level, meaning, for instance, Italy in 2012, expanding, that means expanding those 26 letters of English alphabet with characters used in various cultures, languages, scripts, accented characters, diacritical characters. In Italy, they expanded their set of characters with Italian accented characters, French and German. Or why only French and German? Why not Spanish? Because Italy borders with France and Germany. There are a lot of French and German-speaking people, especially in border areas. And that was actually a step in allowing them to use their rights as national minorities. With one, I would say, additional feature of the cyber world. Usually in countries where you have minorities, national, cultural, religious, if they are concentrated on some territory, then they have some additional rights, like traffic signs, bilingual. However, but only in those areas. In digital world, if you are in a national domain and you have that ability, doesn't matter where you are. You can use that right everywhere. I would like to stress another example, my favorite, Norway. When they were introducing IDN to the second level of their .no, they included 3 alphabet sets different from the Sami people. So how many are there Sami people with 3 sets of different alphabets? A total of 35,000. So it's not about the number, it's about basic human right. How to use internet in your own language. Not everybody speaks English. Yes, we all speak here. A lot of other users speak English fairly enough to use basic services, but even more of them, and they are those on the other side of the digital divide, who are not using or are using very limited services to a limited extent because they don't understand English. So in 2010, we decided to go for the IDN domain name Cyrillic.serb to use the fast track process. That meant another domain. It's not expanding the .rs with additional characters. That was a completely new domain name based on Serbian Cyrillic. I was a member of the working group, and I remember that when we were thinking about should we start the sunrise period equal for all, or should we give existing users of registrants of .rs domain space some extra rights? So we said, okay, each one of them will have 6 months reserved equivalent Cyrillic domain names. So what is equivalent if you have characters that are not accented? That would be the same in Cyrillic. But let's say RNIDS, our host, in Cyrillic, what would be reserved for them? RNIDS and RNIDS. Why? Because there is the accent over S, and we couldn't know for every user what did he originally compressed his name into those 26 letters of English alphabet. And then we thought, well, maybe it would have been better if we introduced IDN to the second level of .rs, and then we would have one-to-one relation. What we thought of at that time? Serbian Cyrillic is the official script, but we also widely use Latin script, which we call our Latin script, which is the same one used in Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro. And there was no time for that. We wanted to use the fast track process, and we finished everything in 2011. In 2012, we launched the .serb domain, and it started its own life, parallel to the .rs. Several years later, as more and more international domain spaces appeared, as more of them become expanded with additional letters, we decided that we should readdress the .rs, which is still in using 26 letters from English alphabet, to introduce the second level. But what? Just our Latin? Wait a minute. Who else lives in this country? There are 21 registered national minorities which use several sets of Latin characters: Romanian, Hungarian, Slovakian, etc. Plus, there are several others who use different Cyrillic sets: Bulgarian, Macedonian, Ukrainian, Montenegrin. They have additional letters, some are written differently. So we are right now in the process of developing rules for introducing new tables in both our .rs and .serb domain names, working in close cooperation with those national councils of national minorities, explaining to them what are the advantages, that they will get a new opportunity. During that work, we even learned that one of them not all of them are from neighboring countries, which is usual. Some of them are from countries which are, let's say more north in the Central Europe.
Russians, let's say, not exist.
Okay, and Slovaks. So in their native country, they still don't they have not expanded their domain name space, which brings me to a thought that maybe legal physical entities from their country might be interested in .rs when we broaden it with those additional letters. So in the end, what is it about? It's about identity first, then it's about allowing more people to use internet services in all of their extent, including the domain names. So call IDN for identity.
Okay, we heard a story. Several countries in our region already have IDN. For example, Slovenia, diacritics are on second level. Romania, Bulgaria, they have Cyrillic one, Macedonia, etc. So, do you think that this approach is good for this digital literacy, for this, as Voja said, to provide to more people services from internet? What is your opinion about IDNs? Do you know what IDN means? Okay. Do you know what IDN means? Second time? Okay. Voja, can you tell me what is the acronym?
It's the internationalized domain name.
Thank you. So, this is domain name written on your local script with all diacritics that you have in your script. So, basically, do you share this opinion from Voja that will expand usage among people, usage of internet services? Voja hope so. Do you hope so?
Yes, we do hope so. We have lately launched the Armenian IDN, which is .hi, and we are on the stage of accepting applications. We have passed the trademark accepting applications, and now we already put it on free registrations. And we really hope that it will raise people usage of internet due to the fact that not everyone can read and use and understand English language. And we hope that Armenian content and the resources in Armenian content will raise to this fact. So we really hope for that.
Anyone else? No? No opinions on that. When Voja said about Norway, I have recalled one story from Norway. And this is a service of broadband and last mile problem. They were solving this problem with offer to the owner of the house in rural areas to dig and to put the fiber into the ground himself, and they will, if they do that, they will get a very cheap price of services. Do you think this is the solution for rural area? Jan? Some special approach, maybe?
Well, the more you put fiber in the ground, the cheaper it is. Right? The more interfaces you buy to connect the fiber, the cheaper it gets. The more routers and switches you buy, the cheaper it gets. So I would say it's a good approach. It's a good way. But I was thinking about it to the previous theme of IDN.
Okay.
Let me share with you a story how I got interested in IDN. It's not all good and it's not all flowers and birds running around. There are also problems. So we launched the IDN in Slovenia. So my surname, as you see, is Žorž with Ž inside. So I got my Žorž.si domain. I'm a very practical guy. I'm also at home. I'm running a lab, 3 racks of equipment. I test lots of stuff: IPv6, DNSSEC, DANE, all this stuff in a real world, with real packets, with real traffic, real data, with real emails, with real services. I prefer to do it, not just to talk about it. So I said, okay, let's go and let's register Žorž.si. And I did. And I managed to sign it with DNSSEC, no problems. But then I said, okay, next thing is, let's set up a web service. And of course, if you set up a web service, you need the SSL certificate to put it on HTTPS. It's the norm. You don't run HTTP anymore these days. Do you think I could? No way. There is no certificate provider in the world that would sign my certificate that has this weird stuff in the host name field of the certificate. And then I said, okay, so I can't secure my web server. So let's see if I can do the email. And I set up the email server on the IDN. And I could not get email from many parts of the world because lots of mail servers do not support UTF-8. And then I tried to set up an email address that you are aware of this problem of Žorž@Žorž.si. Do you think I could do that? No. So how are we going to tackle this? Are we going to just talk about how cool it is, or are we going to fix these problems?
Isn't that something that Universal Acceptance Group is dealing with, this kind of problem?
Absolutely, yes. But I was not supposed to talk about that here, so...
It's also the problem with our .serb domain. My personal domain is Rodić.rs. My email address is Voja, which is abbreviation from Vojislav, Voja@Rodić.rs. I cannot have Voja at Rodić server, not yet. I can have numbers left of the @ sign, 1, 2, 3 at Rodić server. Well, that's not having the same content force as my name and surname. So that's also a problem that's being dealt, and that's what's keeping the expansion of services based on IDNs at the lower level. So we just register the domain name, usually redirect it somewhere meaningful. For my subdomain name is actually will take you to the Cyrillic page on my blog, which also has a Latin page and English page, so I use all the domains, and all the other domains I use for my social network presence.
Okay, we know that IDNs have a lot of problems, and it's under development for years, but it's not only about technical side. We will hear from Anelia what Andrea is not in the room, so is left, so we can speak about Bulgarian. Marcus is here. Sorry. So we will hear from Anelia remotely from Bulgaria short story what could happen with your IDN before you get it. Anelia, are you here? Is not in the room, so is left, so we can speak. Let's wait. Remote participant. Yeah.
While we wait, I want to add to what Voja said about the contract terms. You know this lovely story about one of the companies, I've forgotten now which one, wrote into their contract terms in number 25 of the clauses, and you will give your first child as a payment.
Let's wait.
And everyone, with the exception of one person, signed this contract. So no one sees. And in the Eurobarometer assessment and survey that we have just finalized and will be coming out next month, I think, it shows that only 22% of the people actually read or admit to having read, and I think that's rather higher than those who really do read. 22% of the people claim to have read the terms and conditions of their contracts. So this is something that has potential implications, there's no question about that. With the exception of one person. Contract. So
Anelia?
And in the Eurobarometer assessment and survey that we have just finalized and will be coming out next month, I think, it shows that only 22% of the people actually read or admit to having read, and I think that's rather higher than those who really do read. 22% of the people claim to have read the terms and conditions of their contracts. So this is something that has potential implications, there's no question about that. With the exception of one person.
Ministry of Transport, Information Technology
So
and
and in the Eurobarometer assessment and survey that we have just finalized and will be coming out next month, I think, it shows that only 22% of the people actually read.
So we don't hear Anelia well. Sorry, it doesn't work. So let's say not only IDNs are in problem, WebEx is also the problem. So I will ask the audience, do you have any other questions regarding digital divide in your country that we didn't cover here? Nebojša.
Hello everybody, my name is Nebojša Regoja, I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina Foreign Affairs Ministry. It's not question, but it's maybe just addition to this talk about IDN. My suggestion for one of the topics for SEEDIG and also for Eurodig this year was to discuss IDN, having on mind the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina where it's a little bit more complicated than, for example, in, I don't know, Greece, where they need this IDN with Greek characters. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we would need Latinic script with characters like in Žorž's name, but also we would need Cyrillic script as well. The question is, again, all these problems that were mentioned here, our internal problems in manning and financing these changes, but all these problems that were mentioned here, it's my strong belief, should not stop national regulators or any other participants in that process to stop working on IDN. It's not only a matter of, I don't know, it's maybe big words, national pride, but I think it's nice to have a possibility to use internet in your own language and your own script. So please keep working on that. Thank you.
Yes, Jan?
So I completely agree. It should not stop. My point is that there is a governance and politics part of it and regulatory part of it. If this part goes too fast, too far, and the technology part does not follow and fix the problems, it doesn't make sense. So we need to bridge the leap between these two bubbles that are floating around the world and somehow make sure that and not just at IDN, in every internet matter, that the governance, that we must say there is a leap between technical world of operators building the internet and the governance that is doing your own thing. Both these worlds needs to go at the same speed, at the same time, and working out the problems. We need to build a bridge.
Thank you. Any other opinion?
Sorry, I will continue about my position that I previously expressed about cost, because cost is important when you access the infrastructure. Yeah, I heard the position about access can be covered using mobile network. My position is wrong to do that because cost is the factor, it's not the technical part. And second, about content, because as you know, in television and in internet, what makes importance is the content. And you know as well that there are two factors that will create opportunities for the internet. It's games and you know the other. Basically what I would like to say, to have content, yes, it's fine. But the social society, as we spoke in the morning, has a word to say, but a very limited one. And I would like to give you a technical example, which are not discussed here. For example, the growing about HTML5 sites, where plain they are telling you your browser is old, so you cannot use it. Why? Because from technical point of view, till now you are accustomed to use mostly on media files the Flash. And now it's not longer possible because most of sites which have video and embedded media are using HTML5. It was a consensus about that? No, it was a decision by owner of sites, software producer, that made a decision to put the burden of processing on the end devices, which is fine for tablets and smartphones, not so great for desktop and laptops. So the technical issues are the most important one, and then discussion and involvement. If society doesn't have a strong word, then we'll end up with some technical decision in favor of producer, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other opinion? Vale.
If I will be born, I want to be an engineer. Because I really would like to thank. I think it's really, really important that when we talk about the internet or the ICT, we talk about infrastructure. And very often the internet is all about content. Freedom of speech, content. Cultural representation, content. Without the infrastructure, and the infrastructure when is spoken out by the technical community is not the commercial infrastructure, what someone want to market to me to sell. And I remember that the infrastructure and the telecom were public owned. And now more and more they are privatized, which means that the fiber that had been created by the people paying their taxes now belong to big corporations that can push whatever they want, whatever new business innovation domain. And what is challenging me, and this is, so please stay till the end, is that when we talk about business, we talk about innovation, and we say that human rights, access is a human right. It's you know, when business, we cannot stop the innovation of the business, and so if the human rights get in the way, let's get rid, because innovation will bring growth, development, but resources are scarce. In a capitalist system, resource belongs to someone, or someone want to exploit resource. So I think that the key point of being in a dialogue and with different stakeholders, to have a technical community explaining how much the internet is really into the grounds. Thank you.
I mean, how much deep we dig. Okay. I will ask key participants to try to give me their opinion about Southeastern Europe and digital divide. I was asking the audience, and share your thoughts. What you think, where is the problem in Southeastern Europe? Megan already told us something. So, Valentin.
Okay, I'll start by saying that these issues about digital agenda in Southeast Europe was raised, for me at least, back in 1999 when the British government organized a session devoted to the region next to Brighton somewhere. And a lot of participants from this area were there. Some of us were new, or pretty new to the concepts, to the vision and everything. But the Brits were quite advanced, and they had, let's say, policies. They had everything, or more or less everything it took to be in the lead. Coming back now to your question, this region is quite vast. And it's difficult to assess, from my side at least, the problems, as you pointed out, which face some countries and other countries don't. Of course, one common denominator is the divide, the internal divide, at the level of each country, because this is probably the sore point and the sad situation, to see that in a globalized world, not all citizens here in the region are, let's say, accepted or can be accepted because they don't have access, because they don't have the skills, because they are not equal in their rights. So internet is more or less a human right today. Not everybody benefits from this, let's say, right nowadays. And this is probably one of the prerequisites, or maybe one of the preoccupations which we are facing, to make, let's say, people, every citizen in Europe at least, we are speaking of Europe, Southeast Europe, but anyway, of this region, to be equal and to have access and to be skilled in order to, let's say, keep up with, let's say, a decent career, life, and have, let's say, all it takes to compete with Americans, Japanese, Singaporeans, and all kind of populations around the world, because that's competition.
Thank
worldwide.
You. Megan?
Yes, thanks. Well, I think, and you are a very good group to speak about these things and to speak to. I think it's like internet governance in general. It's everyone together has to work together. And I think the people here in this room have a particular opportunity and obligation as well to make sure that within your regions, countries, areas, wherever you are, you make sure that everyone who has an interest and not just an interest, but an obligation to work in this area, does exactly what's necessary. The governments for the regulatory aspects, for improving e-skills, the academia and academics for encouraging development of better skills, industry for rolling out infrastructure, civil society for making sure that access goes to the right people, etc., etc. So that's an action for everyone in the room to take back home again. And of course, we do what we can within the Commission, but even at our level, it also requires the participation of everyone. So it's something we're all in together and we can all work together on. And by the way, I wanted to make a small comment. I shouldn't do this, but I think you said that the purple was there for the women, but I think it's actually for Prince, wasn't it? The color of Prince, but I shouldn't raise those things.
Okay. Voja.
15 years ago, when I was living in Belgrade downtown and having a party line phone, or a double line, meaning sometimes you pick up the phone, there's no signal. Why? Because someone else in the neighborhood, I found out who, there's an old movie with Gorgi Peck and Doris Day, Pillow Talk, about party lines. At that time, 5 years later, even 10 years later, when you ask me about digital divide, for me it would be the difference between internet haves and don't haves.
Is it time?
Or those who have slow dial-up lines and those who have broadband. Of course, the definition of the technical specification of broadband are expanding. I remember 10 years ago, some friends from Western Europe having 100 megabit at home. However, today, whenever digital divide is mentioned to me, I think about completely other things. First, digital literacy. In every aspect of it, meaning understanding of what is happening to you, what are you doing and what is being done to you. When you are looking at the internet, internet is looking back at you. When you are a member of a service, I will not name any, that has 300 million users, 500 million users, more than 1 billion users, how is your reality, digital reality, but it's more and more, we used to talk about the digital footprint of our lives. Our lives have already on the brink of becoming digital in so many ways. And those unmentioned on the, or not so clearly mentioned on the first session, who are also governing the internet are those who can shape by services that we use, what is our perception of the world as a whole. Whether it's on local level, in your city, in your area, on your continent, or the whole world. Those who are more digitally literate are aware of that. And then they can start thinking about how to protect privacy and not abandon technology completely. How to use the technology and have at least a reasonable illusion of preserving one's privacy. And those who have no idea of what is being done to them when they are using their devices. And you see, what has changed? When I'm speaking about using devices, I'm showing actually holding a phone. 15 years ago, I would say using their devices, and I would make something like this, typing on the keyboard. It's something that's in the office. It's not something I turn on at home at all. It's the device and the changes to our behavior, that those devices that are intimately connected to us all the time, all the day. How many of you go to sleep and just, look at a few more statuses, emails, and then it drops under the pillow? Or how many of you, when you wake up in the morning, even before you go to the bathroom, just quickly check what happened last night on the net? So that's my stand on digital
you
divide.
don't need to answer
present.
this question about bathrooms, so... Jan.
Yeah, so it's me again. So, of course, I will look at this from a technical perspective. I'm an engineer, as we pointed out. If you want to close the digital divide, if you want to give access to people, you need infrastructure, period. There's no way around it. If you don't have infrastructure, you have a philosophy session, nothing else. So, and there is a news. IPv4 address space has run out, and I did not hear word IPv6 for the whole day today. I'm disappointed a bit. And Axel and Chris from RIPE NCC can tell you a bit more about this little news that IPv4 space has run out. At the same time, in Tirana, we had a SE5 RIPE regional meeting where Mr. Fotion talked about they want to connect 90% of people to the internet before 2020. And there is Ericsson that is predicting that we will have 50 billion devices connected to the internet until 2050. And nobody's talking about IPv6, and we run out of IPv4. If we want to expand the internet on IPv4, we need to put people in the small walled gardens that are called carrier-grade nets, that we call evil. It's bad. It divides people, not bridges people together. And how are we going to do it? If the internet governance is not talking about these problems, I have no idea, really, seriously. Seriously. Do we want to implement IPv6 or not as the region?
Okay, any opinions from the audience? No. Oh, one.
I agree about both sides, but I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. Investing in technical infrastructure and bridging the divide, because even the infrastructure might be running out, but even the ones we have right now is being used, like Mr. Rodić said, is being used so in a way which is, illiterately. Like, I'm from Turkey, and people there, a lot of people, they're connected, if in the literal sense they're connected, but all they do is go on Facebook, play games, check out the match results, and that's all. And like he stated, they agree to so many things and they have no idea the consequences. And even the government, they're not really sure what the internet is and what it's about. Like, just recently, 50 million citizens had their personal information stolen, and now it's online to see. You can go online and see the name of my father, mother, my national ID number. So I don't think we should necessarily be talking about just one side or the other, but both is equally important, because, like I said, the internet we have right now, it's not really being used to its full potential.
Thank you. Okay, no more comments, but we have key messages at the end. So, Michael.
Because I'm sure everybody's hungry and ready to get going, I'm just going to, if everybody could just raise their hands to indicate if you agree with these, please let me know. There was a lot of topics discussed, so I tried to incorporate everything as best as I could. The first one is, there are many layers to internet development in the region, including access, broadband and infrastructure, but also content, literacy, cost, and services. Okay? Digital literacy and awareness about content like e-services or e-government platforms, specifically in local languages, is critical to bridging the digital divide. Okay, thank you. Access solely to mobile technologies in many rural areas contributes to the digital divide by limiting bandwidth for those who cannot access fiber and is not a sole solution for rural area access. Okay. Noted. Noted. Mobile technology is a temporary access solution, but must also be reinforced by fiber and better use of spectrum to shrink the digital divide in rural areas. And lastly, many divides exist: internal versus external, rural versus urban, Western Europe versus Eastern Europe, youth versus seniors, and digitally literate versus digitally illiterate. It's kind of half, so I'm just going to cut that one off. Okay, I will edit the third one.
Okay, before the lunch, I just want to thank our key participants, Valentin Neguica, Megan Richards, Vojislav Rodić, and Jan Žorž. And you are free to go to eat something.
And one short announcement for IGF initiatives existing or under creation in this region. We will have an informal meeting over lunch. There will be a table reserved. Just go there and take a seat. Thank you.